Is Hannah coming tonight?
She is not.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, November 18th. My name is Mark Adler. I'm your cruise director, and we're going to go straight to the consideration of the minutes for, let's see, October 14th. I hope you've all had a chance to read them in their glory. Anyone have any questions, comments, amendments, or such? Or motions related thereto?
I move that we accept the October 14th meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Judy, second by Carlos. Any further discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes of the 14th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Minutes are accepted. Now let's move to the much more exciting draft minutes of our special town meeting on the 18th, the 3-line minutes. Is there any discussion or motions related thereto?
I move that we accept the meeting minutes of October 18th as written.
Second.
There's a motion by Judy, a second by Dennis to accept the minutes on the 18th. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Minutes are approved, accepted. All right. We're going to start our first workshop. Our subject today will be other post-employment benefits, sometimes called OPEB. Kevin, take it away, man.
All right.
Oh, I just want to say, before we do, we're going to have these workshops on kind of every meeting. We're going to have different topics, and we'll discuss it later, what some of the topics are. I want to be able to keep this part of the meeting more casual. Don't feel like you need to get my attention and raise your hand. Just, chime in. This is a discussion, like a seminar, where we can all just ask questions and learn about whatever the topic is. It's not supposed to necessarily relate to what's exactly going on in the world or in the town or in the budget today. It's more of a primer to give you a sense of how it all works. Thank you. Sorry, Kevin.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Good evening, members of the Finance Committee. It's a pleasure to be here. I've developed a couple slides on other post-employment benefits, just again to help hopefully provide a little bit more information and an overview on this topic as we talk about it so much and never really have the opportunity to dive in. So it's great to be able to do that. So I'll work through a couple terms and definitions, talk a little bit about Shrewsbury's other post-employment benefits and our OPEB liability, and then ways that we can and do manage other post-employment benefit costs. So my little disclaimer there at the bottom is that, I have prepared terms or definitions to the terms, and they're based upon a number of sources, and some of them are combined, so you may not be able to find these exact definitions elsewhere. There's a little bit of Kevin, a little bit of GFOA, a little bit of Mass DOR information, and I'm just trying to assemble it again for the conversation and benefit and discussion this evening. So other post-employment benefits, really simply put for Shrewsbury specifically and many other places, it's the health insurance that we are committing to pay to our employees once they retire. That is the largest portion. The only other post-employment benefit outside of our defined pension system for Shrewsbury is the ability for our retirees to take life insurance. And there it's a very small amount. And there's nothing else that's provided by the town. Of course, the pension is the main true benefit that retirees receive. And health insurance is the second largest and drives our OPEB cost more than anything else. GASB is used throughout. It's the GSAB, Government Accounting Standards Board. It's kind of the general oversight for all public entities in the country and help set rules and standards that our auditors use when they look at our books and compare us to other communities. GASB 75, so the Government Accounting Standards Board report 75 is, or statement 75, is their statement based that bases the findings that we need to report OPEB on every year. Net OPEB liability is the total amount of other post-employment benefits liability that we have minus the value that we have in trust, and we'll talk about our trust later on. ARC is our required annual contribution. It's the amount that we need to pay each year to adequately meet our future benefits. And then that trust is a irrevocable fund of money that we're setting dollars aside for the future payment of our retiree health insurance costs. So, as I talked a little bit about, OPEB mainly throughout the evening, we'll just really think about that as health insurance for retirees. And we'll talk a little bit now about how we provide those benefits, what is it that we do, and what we're promising to employees in the future if they retire from our employment, and when they receive those benefits, how much we contribute, and how that cost has been accruing over the year and how we manage it at this point. So interestingly enough, whenever you get into the real technical accounting side of this, is that our actuary and other accountants really are able to quantify how much an employee is due in the future each year of their active employment, and that's how this OPEB liability accrues throughout someone's career, even though we're not obligated to pay them anything today. And we assess that every 2 years. So we have an actuary that comes in, that runs these actuarial models and develops our liability, or quantifies our liability, and it's something that at this point we just need to keep our eye on. There's no obligation for the town to be putting any certain amount of money into the trust, but we'll talk about what we've done so far and what we plan to do in the future. So, OPEB, as far as Shrewsbury goes, we'll think about our municipal employees, our school employees, and those who work for Selco. We take a snapshot of that within the current fiscal year. As far as those retirees, we have 544 retirees who take health insurance benefits, and 398 retirees who take basic life insurance benefits. Retirees are eligible for health benefits once they retire under Massachusetts general law. So it's not a decision that's solely made by the town. It's a benefit that's conferred through the general law for public employees and local governments and state government. And through those laws, we do manage future other post-employment benefits costs by requiring our retirees to select a Medicare eligible plan once they achieve Medicare eligibility at age 65.
Kevin, how does the health insurance benefit or the plan compare to the employee's plan?
Yep. So the active employees plans, I think the biggest difference that you noticed is the retiree plan is much cheaper. You're talking roughly about a quarter of the cost of an active employee's plan. That's one of the reasons that they're driven to a Medicare eligible plan and don't have the ability to stay on our active plans. I think I have the numbers here a little bit lower. They range in price from the town's contribution on a monthly basis of it costing the town anywhere from $178 to $262 a month. On the active employee side, you really are talking closer to $1,000 a month for an active employee plan, $12,000 to $14,000 a year. So really the price, same insurers, same networks, same opportunities, but different cost.
Okay.
So Kevin, if a retiree decides to opt out of the plan, do we have to pay them monthly?
We do not.
Okay.
No, and we don't do that for active employees either. So there's no we don't pay employees, so to speak, not to take the insurance. Yeah, there's no requirement on that end.
So what's the reason that it's cheaper once they retire? Is it because we know they don't have kids, et cetera? Is it a different actuarial?
Well, no, it's really, a lot of the Medicare eligible plans are set and fixed by the government. So it's a defined price that comes down. We do have 3 plans that we self-insure. And for some reason, I don't know the answer to that, but they are just a cheaper monthly premium when you compare to, I assume it all goes in there, right? Like,
Yep.
lifestyle and all those things. Maybe counterintuitive. You would think as you get older, you go to the doctor more and the cost would be higher, but that's not reflected in the plan prices.
This is a benefit they are getting as part of their retirement, affixed to the pension. It's not the pension, but it's affixed to the pension. It's the same benefit. And maybe the theory is they're not collecting a salary. We can't be charging them large premiums because they're not, otherwise it would just be coming out of their pension.
How long, I'm sorry,
Go ahead, please.
is there, do they have to be an employee of the town for a certain amount of time, before they're eligible, or?
To be a retiree of the town, you have to have worked here or within the retirement system for 10 years. So, but there's no obligation. We don't have an obligation, although some towns do, for them to have taken health insurance as an active employee to be eligible to take it as a retiree. And the theory behind that is that we don't want people to arbitrarily take an active plan if they don't really need it in their final years. Some towns range from 1 year to 3 years. So they say, in order to be eligible for health insurance as a retiree, you have to take it for your last 3 years as an active employee. Well, we think that falsely drives people to take insurance they may not necessarily want to take and need, and drive our active costs up.
Right, yeah.
So we provide the ability to go on or off retiree health insurance for any eligible retirees as they please.
So did you say 10 years of employment here or within the retirement system? What does that mean?
So the state retirement, so Shrewsbury has its own retirement system, which we fund through the budget. And we manage the assets of it on our own. There are retirement systems that are like Worcester County retirement system that some communities within or municipalities within the county, contribute into a larger pool. So the town has the option to go it alone or to be part of a larger retirement group. But any valid retirement system for local government or state government entity is the same. So if you have 1 year working for the Commonwealth and 9 years for Shrewsbury, you have 10 years.
I see, okay.
Or like me, I've worked in the town of Grafton and Leicester and Shrewsbury, all those years combined.
Okay, all right,
for
thank you
my
for that
total tenure.
clarification.
Yep.
I wasn't understanding otherwise.
Yep.
One other question? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, when we say Medicare eligible, means that the employees, the ex-employees are also part of Medicare?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's probably why it's cheaper then.
Probably, yeah, that's probably one of the largest
That's
cost
because Medicare is
differences.
taking the bulk of the cost.
Correct. You're probably correct. Yep.
What's
makes
the
sense.
average length of time that the post-retirement employee benefits go on for?
That's a good question. I can see if I have the detail in our last actuarial analysis.
So obviously, once they go into Medicare, we're still paying something for the Plan D or whatever?
Those are the Medicare eligible costs that I am showing up there, yes. Yep.
Does that 50 to 73%, is that what the employee's contributing or what the town is contributing? Or do we pay 100%? I'm not sure.
That's the town's contribution ranges from a minimum of 50% to a maximum of 73.5%, depending on the plan that's selected.
Okay.
And those numbers below it are the range of those various plans. So that's the town side of the contribution.
And what's the town for the regular employees, for the active employees, what's our contribution?
It ranges from a low of 60% to a high of 78%. And that depends on the type of plan that employees select. So our lowest cost provider currently is Fallon, and their most narrow network is the plans that the town contributes 78%. So when we contribute 78% to a Fallon plan, we're still paying less out of pocket than we may for the most expensive plan that the town pays 60% of. So we're really trying to incentivize employees to take the lowest cost plan.
Does that include prescription drugs and all that?
It does.
Yes.
All of our plans include prescription
You
drugs.
see, we're doing this topic during open enrollment season for all of us. We all have this on our mind right now. If we did this in May, we wouldn't know what to ask.
So for fiscal year 22, we part of the health insurance line item, which is about a $13 million line item, you'll see roughly 10% of that health insurance cost is attributable to our retirees, $1,375,000, and which equates in the bigger picture of the total operating, but only about 1% of our total costs. So that's how we manage other post-employment benefits right now. It's called pay-as-you-go model. Whatever the bill is each year, we're satisfying that, whether, you know, someone may have retired 2 days ago or 20 years ago. That's all included in this, you know, $1,375,000. So that's the town's contribution.
Kevin, for clarification, so there's that first one, 544 take the health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's currently how many retirees we have taken the health insurance for the total of just about 1.4.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Yep. And then 398 who take basic life insurance benefits, which is all they're eligible for our basic program. Cost the town $424 a month, so that's about $20,000 a year. And that also sits within the health insurance line item within the budget.
$424
Dollars.
$4.24 a month, not
Yep.
424.
Correct. $4.24 a month. Sorry if I misspoke. Yep.
So when we say the cost of $1,375,000, that's the actual cost as well. So there is no like a trust fund or anything. It's not being funded.
Mm-hmm.
So the actuary is just kind of giving us an estimate.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That is correct.
It does not depend upon how we fund it.
That is
Funding is
correct.
based on actual cost,
That is correct.
unlike pensions, which is kind of, you fund the liability, future liability
Yep.
as well. This one we don't.
Yep. We are funding future liability. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We are funding money into our pension trust fund.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of very immature. We've only been doing it for less than 10 years. So I do have some data on that. So we're building the trust, but we're not drawing anything from that trust yet, which is the plan once it matures and gets money into it. We will move more into that pension-based system, hopefully. That's kind of the goal.
What's the growth of the expense? Is it staying around $1.3 million, or has it been going up from?
Well, it's been going up consistent with the general health insurance trend. So I would say on average, anywhere from 2 to 6% a year. All right. So that system that we have with those 544 folks who are already retired, and then our current employees allow our actuary to identify the total liability that the town will have in the future if it has to satisfy all of its current promises when those individuals retired. And kind of to Rajiv's question, ideally, I think in the future, we will want to, or we will always want to think of other post-employment benefits, just like we do for our defined pension benefits system, where we develop a nest egg, fund that on an annual basis, realize market gains, which we are right now because the funds are invested, and then draw from the trust fund in the future. Right now, our net liability, that is, if we based upon everything the actuary puts into his formula, which includes things like life expectancy, the length of time on average that we can expect an employee's retirement to last. We currently have a net liability of about $54 million. And that is, the current liability is about $59 million, and we have a little less than $5 million in our OPEB trust. We haven't been funding that very aggressively, but we are moving into a more aggressive time frame now that the pension system has been, achieved fully funding. That was our primary focus as far as these types of benefits, and we're going to, and we did at this fall town meeting, started shifting money that would have otherwise gone to the pension system into other post-employment benefits.
Kevin,
Yep.
the net liability number, I'm trying to figure out how that's calculated.
Sure.
I mean, okay, we've got about 500 and some odd employees.
Yep.
That's on it currently. Obviously, we have some active employees. There's some probably percentage that's assumed is going to retire and be added on to it.
Yep.
So I assume that then there's some assumption about how long everybody's going to live and that cost.
Yep.
And that's how they get to 54.
That is correct. Yep.
I'm
So,
trying to figure that out because if it's like $1.4 million for 1 year,
Mhm.
that's what I understood.
yep. So maybe let's
How
talk
did
about it from an
Or
let's talk about it from an individual basis. Maybe that may help. So, myself, Alex, Jeff, Dave, the money that the town will contribute to our health insurance once we retire is in that $54 million number. So it's assuming that, it's looking at Shrewsbury's experience.
Oh, may I?
Yep, sure.
So that 54 includes you guys, even though you're not, see, I was
Yep.
thinking that they only took a percentage that was gonna maybe retire eminently. You're saying that
Nope.
this is for all active okay, that
That
makes
is
a lot more
correct.
sense.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's assuming that, over time, Shrewsbury has seen 70% of employees who have 15 years or greater service will be a retiree. And those retirees, on average, will live for 20 years after they retire.
Okay.
So not only does it include my obligation, as a retiree, it assumes that I'm going to live so long once I retire. It assumes that I'm going to retire later than I want it to assume that I'm going to retire. And, so it's calculating what health insurance is going to be based on current trend,
Okay.
20, 25 years from now.
Gotcha. All right, that
Yep.
makes a lot more sense as to how they get to the 54. Okay.
Yep. And, on the active employee side, there, between town and Selco, there's about 1,000 employees. So, and, that obviously, a few people retire every year, a few new people backfill it. So it's just this constant chain of folks who go through that number.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
So the 54 million, right, that's the future liability in future dollars.
That is correct.
So in order to be, theoretically, right, in order to be fully funded, what would that mean in terms of an annual liability? Which one would, just like a pension plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to provide future benefits, you have to fund so much per year. You take a 7%, 5%, whatever it is.
Right.
So do we have a number on that? Like if 50, let's say today we want to be fully funded, let's say, assume. What would that require the town to contribute?
On an annual basis?
Right.
Um,
Because obviously your retirement or Alex's retirement is like it's in
Right.
the future, right? So
right.
so to be fully funded, what does that mean in terms of liability?
Well, I mean, I think it's how quickly we'd want to get to fully funded, right? So I think if you look at a recommended schedule over 20 years, it's going to be about $6 million of funding per year in order to offset that. I think your normal cost is closer to the, $750,000 or $1 million range in order to feed the trust, kind of the system that you identified, feed the trust with enough money, generate enough gains, and then be able to pay out that actual liability.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the $54 million to be, if the town of Shrewsbury closed its doors today, but still had to pay out all these benefits for everyone who's currently here or we've already promised this to as an employee. This is how much money we would need to have in the bank today to satisfy that.
Oh, really?
Yes. assuming no new employees came on after we close the door when we walk out tonight. So that's that liability
So
for,
it's that future, it's the net future liability.
with all those assumptions built into it, that Alex is
Right.
going to work at least 10 years, but probably 22, right? Like whatever that average is. Yep.
Okay.
But we close up the doors today. We've promised this, that we are legally bound. Like that is our contract, so to speak, under state law with employees. This is that number.
Now, if one of the employees goes to a different municipality or state or something else, we are no longer responsible for that at all. Do we contribute to that at all, or is it completely gone?
Under state law, municipalities are allowed to charge other municipalities for OPEB, but municipalities did that for a few years after the law changed, and everyone's kind of like, why am I sending you $350 and getting $375 from Westboro and getting
An
$12?
accounting nightmare and there's
Yeah.
no benefit. Yeah.
It's a wash. Yep.
Okay, so that whole talk that we were saying earlier about, the 10 years, it could be 9 years, in Northborough and 1 year in Shrewsbury. Nevertheless, Shrewsbury's gonna do it. But the theory is somewhere out there is someone in Northborough who worked in Shrewsbury for a while.
Pretty much.
And, everyone's debt is everybody's debt.
Correct.
Okay,
So I mean, I guess that net liability is good to know, but it's kind of it's not really a number we have to worry about, I gather.
That is correct.
I think I believe that what you're talking about is creating this fund. What we want to do is put enough money in the fund on a regular basis, as you said. I mean, I think I'm just parroting
Yep.
what you said, but I just want to make sure that what makes sense is that we put a certain dollar amount in, goes into the market, so we're getting, hopefully, positive returns on the money. Then that will fund basically our ongoing yearly $1.4 million, $1.6 million as inflation goes up. But that's what we'd be funding, so we're not getting behind.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So second question, are we behind at all, or is this a fund where we don't really get behind because we have to pay it?
Well, I think that's the biggest question with OPEB right now. Do we treat it like the pension system and say we're behind, right? GASB hasn't told us that we have to. Now, GASB has told us as a local government we have to be fully funded on our pension liabilities as of 2035. Now, we're there. A lot of communities are much further behind us. So it's really, even though the city of Springfield may only be 40% funded in their retirement, they're still meeting their annual liabilities for their current retirees for their pension system, right? So it's really who determines when we're behind. And GASB is that organization that has done it both for pension, but they haven't kind of turned the dial and said, you have to be fully funded on your OPEB by any certain date.
So what I meant by being behind is that every year we pay
Yes.
whatever it costs. So we haven't accumulated a debt anywhere.
That is
That's really
correct.
what I meant. And I understand that somewhere accounting laws for pension, they haven't done that yet for OPEB. So at this point, as long as GASB doesn't come along and say, we have to realize that 54,000, that's just a FYI number.
That is correct.
What we really, I think you're on the right path, is what we really need to do is to set up that account so that we're funding that, what did you call it? I mean, an account, whatever.
Yep, it's a trust. Yep.
Right, to pay that down. So that makes a lot of sense to me,
Yep.
so.
So one could say that this is like a trust, like a rainy day fund, maybe?
Mhm.
In case the finances of the town are, and we need to kind of save $1.3 million.
Yep.
We could pay it from the $4.9 million.
That is correct. Yes.
thank you.
So just a couple comparisons. So like how good or bad are we at OPEB, right? So that's kind of the middle section of this slide. So in 2020, our total covered employee payroll was $70,286,000. And let me draw a quick distinction here also between the pension system and OPEB. A key difference between the pension system and OPEB is that teachers are in the OPEB number. They're not in the pension number. So this includes all town and school employees, where the pension system only includes town and Selco employees. So that's a big distinction. So that's why the covered payroll is so high, that our employees, or excuse me, our teachers' health insurance is part of the OPEB liability because we fund that.
Does Selco contribute
Yes.
its share?
They do.
Okay, so the town budget is not covering, so, I mean, I'm sure it's a we pay in and they reimburse.
Absolutely.
But it's 100% reimbursement. There's
It is
not a
correct. Yep.
a subsidy.
Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So it's all tracked separately, so we know Selco's liability, the town's liability, et cetera. We actually know water and sewer liability because as you dig back in your head in the budget process, you'll remember when we go through the indirect costs for water and sewer and all those other enterprise funds, we direct funding from those rates into the OPEB line item.
And do we handle the paperwork, the calculations of it for the Selco and just simply say to the Selco finance folks, this is what the number is, or do they handle all that and come back to us?
The first.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. So our current OPEB liability is 77% of our covered employee payroll. So I just threw up a couple other notable entities to show you their percentages. So the city of Boston's OPEB liability as a percentage of its covered payroll is 142%. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts is 295%. And the town of Northborough got lucky because I found their number and it's 142%. So in talking to our actuary, we're in a relatively in a healthy position as far as that percentage, and that's the best way to compare us to any other entity as far as how healthy or unhealthy we are as far with OPEB.
And that's another reason to build up the trust fund.
It is that percentage will continue to shrink.
I don't understand that at all.
Okay.
I mean, I don't understand why, I don't understand, I mean, okay, covered employee payroll, I think I understand that. That's what we pay for people.
That's correct.
But I don't understand the 77 versus, like, why would Northborough be 142% and we're 77%? I don't
Yep.
understand. I would think that the calculation of what they all would be very much similar to us, but.
So it depends. They may have not contributed anything to an OPEB trust yet, where we've
I
contributed
see
this
what you're
$4
saying.
million.
That's the percentage of the okay.
Yep,
I got it. I'm
yep.
sorry.
So this is the net, so it's the liability minus the trust, if there is one.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and that's what this number is.
Okay.
And that becomes I guess, the denominator
Yep.
of this situation, or the numerator, whatever it is. But that's what we're using as the multiplier. Thank you.
Would it also imply that, for example, Boston had a declining payroll over the years? Like there are more retirees per working person? I mean, how do you get to 300%?
Well, I mean,
It's
the-
something to do with,
So I think it's more of a function of, especially like in the Commonwealth, as the Commonwealth's annual payroll continues to increase, their contribution into a trust fund either decreases, doesn't keep up, or is non-existent. So that's telling me that if, say, obviously, if
I thought those percentages are liability, nothing to do with trust funds.
well, it would include their.
When we say we are at 77.
It's their net liability.
It's the net, so it's a liability minus the trust.
Yep.
It's,
So I don't know what the exact numbers are, but if we were Boston, that means that our OPEB liability would be, 140 million, and our payroll was 70 million.
so one way to bring that number down would be to reduce your payroll.
Correct.
Another way would be to increase your trust.
Yep.
For example, or some other way to reduce the net liability. If everybody, in the last week of their employment shifted to another municipality or another payer or something. And conversely, you could do the opposite to bring that number back up.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's just a way to compare. Managing OPEB costs, as we've talked about throughout, which has been great. We do use a pay-as-you-go model. We are not in debt or building debt in order to satisfy our annual contributions to retiree health insurance. That pay-as-you-go model currently does cost us about $1.4 million a year. Again, GASB 75 requires reporting the liability and not funding it, at least at this point. Will that change? A lot of actuaries, most actuaries and auditors don't ever see that changing. They don't see a need for it to change, but they do see the need for us to track it and ensure that we have the ability to take care of it. You've heard the scary story, even some cities and towns in Rhode Island, locally, and then in other places in the upper Midwest going bankrupt. So this is, where that liability would come into play when you can't satisfy those commitments that you're making to your current employees.
Just one question. We do pay-as-you-go. Could it be that Boston, Northbrook, et cetera, weren't paying as they go, they were borrowing the money for the liability? Or can you even do that?
I don't think you can borrow,
Okay.
for that. Yep.
Is there any form of insurance we could take to cover our liability in case we do go bankrupt in the,
I don't think so.
no?
I'm not that I'm aware of.
Confused about that.
I think funding the trust is the
Is the biggest.
it's
Yep.
effectively self-insuring that way.
Yep.
At least that's how I would see it.
Take reasonable action, is a third bullet there to build the OPEB trust. I think that's where we remain on solid footing. We do plan to use that flexibility of the money that we're currently placing into OPEB and ensuring that we have enough money to be flexible and feed the pension system, which again, we are required to have fully funded. So that would be a shifting within that department. You can think of the, post-employment benefits as a department in two different line items, the pension system and other post-employment benefits. And as there's either market declines or other indicators from our actuary that we need to add more funding in to make sure we meet our pension obligations, we would pull that out of OPEB. It's a good way to remain flexible. And then again, as Rajiv said earlier, I deal with a question mark. When are we able to build the OPEB trust large enough that we can start to use our annual appropriation rather than the pay-as-you-go model, but we take the funding that we're currently placing into OPEB through the health insurance line item for paying our retirees on the annual basis, those additional funds that we are paying to OPEB through that retirement department, if you can think of it that way. But using the trust balance to fund our liabilities on an annual basis, exactly like we do with our pension system. So that's the direction that we're heading in. How quickly we go will be an annual conversation, at least in the near term, of what we're contributing, both for this year's retirees and what we put in that supplemental line item to start to build the trust, which is a little less than $5 million as we sit today.
When did we start building up the trust? I mean, do we have a mechanism how much we are funding every year?
We don't right now. We've started funding it within the last 8 years, from what I can tell. And we've built it up again to $5 million, and it is invested in, reasonable securities. So it's really that ongoing conversation that we'll be having with this committee of how aggressive that we get and how much goes there, and are there benchmarks or standards that we want to think about with our actuary to achieve those, or does GASB change their position and either require more oversight or actual funding or a deadline of 2050, 2070, whatever the number they may come up with.
I mean, we all still feel the effects of fully funding our pension, and we're familiar with what's involved and the sacrifices we need to make to get that money into that program. It's a long-term benefit, but every year the money we put into it was money we couldn't spend on stuff that year. So that's always, the give and take, and it's a relief as that pension liability got settled. It's a shame to have to scratch at that wound again with OPEB, and it's nice to know not only, like with the pension, we're doing better than a lot of other municipalities, but it's still something that has to get done.
I mean, obviously, if it doesn't sound, from what you're saying from the actuaries, that they think that GASB's going to come through and say that we really have to to fund it. I do think that it would be good if we could contribute to the trust fund, but I would not support an aggressive funding of that form, of that. I mean, I know that it's good that we've got the pension paid, but I think, I know I've been, I know it was maybe a popular opinion, but I feel like we were too aggressive. And I thought that there were times where we had to make cuts to the operational budget that had significant impact, particularly to the schools. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have been funding the pension, but maybe we didn't need to be as aggressive as we were. So I would not support an aggressive funding of this. I do think, you know, it never hurts to be putting something into the trust fund for lean time so that we, you know, so we have that there to draw on. But that's the more conservative approach that I would, and I think that from what you've said, it's kind of your thinking, but I just
No, I
wanted to go on
definitely
record
agree
of
with that.
saying that,
Yep.
seeing we were talking about what we did with the pension.
Yep,
Is that it? Okay.
that's all I had.
Thank you very much. Well, is this available on the town website, this slide presentation?
We can definitely put it up.
Put it on the finance committee page at
Yeah,
least.
we can put it
Or
up
link to
there.
it from there. I don't know if aliasing is allowed. It's
Yeah,
an interesting system you have, but still.
It was,
To say, I know we've paid off the pension or funded it. I think what we have to remember is we've gone through a record stock market where the money's been invested. So we're paid off basically because we invested well. You can't expect the next 10 years to be the same. So I do support putting money into OPEB, maybe not super aggressive, but a little aggressive, because there's a good chance in 6 years, if we go into down markets, we're seeing spots of it now, that the pension we may have to start upping our pension plan so we can, again, shift money over
Agreed.
and shift it back later on. So
Yeah, and
again, I think part of what we'll have to do as a finance committee is see where we are every year, because, you know, investing is great when markets go up. And people forget they go down, and they go down quickly, sometimes come back quickly.
Yeah.
So,
But now that we've had this workshop, when it comes up in the budget, you know,
Yeah.
I think we'll all have a better sense of what it is we're talking about, what we're dealing with, and what these numbers really mean. Because in the past, it's just been this little nebulous number that's really large, but doesn't have a lot of line items, and we can't argue over the details or even understand the details, because it's just, here's the OPEB number, next question. But now we understand it. All right, thank you very much, Kevin. Is anybody else anything on that, or are we ready to move on? Okay, some of the topics that Kevin and I have been brainstorming for future workshops might involve enterprises and utilities as one topic, another one on general funds such as revolving funds, free cash, overlay stabilization, and so forth. I'm hoping maybe we'll have a workshop on planning, the planning department, the planning board, ZBA, development, and so forth. An entire workshop on the schools and school finances, I think, would be very warranted. And as a bonus, at some point, we should cover Selco and how Selco finances work. If there are, however, other topics on general, you know, not something that's specifically pressing to deal with today's budget, tomorrow's budget, this year's budget, but just general workshop like what we had tonight, please chime in or let me know or let Kevin know. And sometime between now and our December meeting, Kevin and I will chat and maybe come up with something for our next meeting.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, move on to item 4, town manager's report. The budget process. Look, I see Jeff and Dave are here. Do we want to skip ahead to them? They already had to sit through this, and I just want to make sure that their time is well used.
Please do.
The pay-as-you-throw annual report, I know that's Dave's. Is that also Jeff's? Okay.
I'm here for moral support.
Oh, great. Well, it's nice to have you. Then why, if it's all right with the committee, I'd just like to skip for the moment onto item 5, just so we can get to them. Okay, great, thank you. Kevin and Alex are stuck here for the whole thing, so I figured.
Good evening, Finance Committee. Thank you for making the adjustment. I appreciate that. My name is David Snowden, DPW Business Manager, and I'm here to review the Pay-As-You-Throw annual report that has been shared with you. It's going to go over the fiscal program highlights and the financial highlights of fiscal 21. I'll go through the executive summary, and then if there's any other questions from the rest of the report, I'm happy to go into those in detail, but we'll hit some of the main talking points first and go from there.
Can any of it be brought up on the big screen for either the home audience or for the few of us who don't have it in paper?
I can work on that. Do you want to do it?
It's in the drawing.
All right.
It's a good report. I'd hate for anyone to miss it. Does everyone on the committee have a copy at their fingertips? Or their
That's on my
phone
phone.
tips?
It's on my phone,
If you're gonna bring it up,
Okay.
I have it here.
Do you want to look over someone's shoulder? Can you share? I mean, we want to make sure everybody can see this, that's
Yeah,
all.
Alex is going to have
they're
it.
bringing it up right now.
Okay, that's good.
I can maybe scroll through from here then.
You've got to switch the thing to mirror and not presenter mode.
There you go.
Hard to see.
Hmm.
That's good. It's the best we can do.
All right, and the report can be made available on the Finance Committee's website as well, and through the DPW as well for the public and anyone else that's interested. So the intent of this report is to look at the financial performance and, as I said, the program performance as it relates to the solid waste and recycling enterprise. This year, we've expanded on the report a little bit, sort of to provide some of the fund information related to the enterprise and some more program details, and sort of give put meat on the bone so we can talk about maybe what we want to do going forward in future years. The historical graphs have been included in the appendix, and a lot of that format is still used throughout the report as well. Looking at the financials, the total revenue for the program was $1,316,654, which was $187,000 greater than was estimated, and 52.47% greater than the previous fiscal year. That number seems shocking, and it is higher, but a big part of that was the pay-as-you-throw increase that was implemented July 1st, 2020. Expenses totaled $2,206,623, which were $121,000 less than budgeted, and $48,000, or 2.2% greater than the previous year. So total expenses were less than budgeted, and they were, as anticipated, greater than the previous fiscal year. A big financial highlight was the positive change in the recycling market, wherein towards the end of the fiscal year, the town started to receive funds back for the recycling commodities as opposed to paying for them. There has been a substantial change in that market, in which you can see that we spent more than half than we did the previous year on the disposal of our recycling materials. And at the close of the fiscal year, the total fund balance was $348,825, which was an increase of $226,736 in the retained earnings of the enterprise. Also reporting here was our state grant account with the ending fund balance of June 30th of $44,572, which was an increase of $13,154. Some program highlights. What we have seen has been an increase in our total tonnage of solid waste and recyclable materials. So it's definitely, I believe, that the change in the pay-as-you-throw pricing incurred a larger amount of recyclables, and we've also noticed that the weight per bag increased as well. The bulk waste collection increase of 31%, those are actual total collected items and not necessarily sticker sales. We talk about sticker sales later. There may be an instance when somebody buys 5 bulk waste stickers and they use one every year. So it's not, the sales and the collections, they do vary slightly. And the textile collection program increased 5.8% for a total of 79 tons collected of collected material for the year. So that's like the big picture of it. And then throughout the report, we go into some greater detail to explain the types of the funds and some of the program changes. But I'm more than happy to leave it open now. If there's any questions, we can drill down in greater detail.
You said, yes, if I may, you said that there's now a better market conditions for the recycling. However, the amount of recycling expenses, because I guess in the end it's still a net cost, is, it improved $1,400. If I'm reading that, it went from 42,000 to 44,000, or am I reading something else? That's in the executive summary.
Maybe I read. Oh, yeah, so this probably my poor language. The previous year, let's go to disposal costs on page 8.
Okay.
If maybe I can bring that over. Thanks, Alex. So the main difference on page 8 on the column, it's labeled disposal costs, and if you go all the way to the right, you'll see 492,000 for fiscal 21, and the previous year was 521,000. Now the main difference there is the 40,000 or so dollars difference in the recycling program. This disposal cost includes both the disposal of the solid waste and the recycling.
So it's a 40-something thousand difference, not a
correct.
40-something thousand cost. I see.
Correct. Well, it was 40,000 cost in FY21, and it was almost 80,000 in the previous year.
Oh. Wow, okay.
So there was a significant change in the recycling market, and very unexpected.
Will it last? Okay.
I can tell you what happened, but
Yeah, okay.
can't see the future.
Expected is still
Yeah.
in air quotes.
Correct. Yeah, so if there's any other questions, please let me know.
Rajiv?
So, could one expect a better than budgeted performance going to fiscal 22 as well? Because we might have based our budget on what the market was at that time. So would that be a possibility?
That is correct. Our planning for the pay-as-you-throw pricing was designed on the market information we had at the time. As we move into this budget season, we can look in closer detail, and we'll have 6 months of data in FY22 to really review to determine what we should budget for that recyclable line item. We've been around, I think, $115,000. The first year we were at 80, so we had a buffer, but that was still close. But being at 40,000, maybe there is some room there, but we'll work with our contracted recovery facility and determine a good number to work with.
Yeah, Vikram?
Yes, thank you, David. So I had a couple of questions. Based on the data that you have, is it possible to sort of analyze and see if there's a better improvement in our recycling behavior in the town? Does that sort of add into the improved cost that you mentioned, or is that just basically now that we're selling recycling stuff, if I heard you wrong, as opposed to paying for people, paying to take our recycling stuff?
No, but that's a tremendous question, and we do have some insight into that. I think there's two ways to look at it. One is the price per bag, the pounds per bag is increasing, so there's more solid waste being put into a bag, so that itself, we're wasting less plastic, but the recycling tonnage did increase as well, and I think there's one good graph that might show that pretty well. Yeah, if we go to 12. Thanks, Alex. One more. Right there. So now cost is probably most often the greatest driver. And the red bar there indicates when the pay-as-you-throw bags price increase was implemented. And you can see that there was a significant uptick in both paper and commingled and paper. The recycling, the cardboard is a little more difficult to see, but there is also a slight uptick in that as well. So our recycling did improve. Recycling tonnage as a part of the total tonnage increased 3.2%. And the recycling portion of the total tonnage of material is almost 33% now. So we did see an improvement in that. Part of that is probably behavior. Part of that is, the consciousness of all of our residents, and some part of that is something else that we don't know at this time.
Mark?
And one just additional question, sorry, Judy. So our bulk waste did increase as well. So that could also be reflected because of the pandemic, a reflection of the pandemic, given that people are working from home more and we're producing a lot more waste as a result.
Correct.
So there are multiple factors. That's just a comment.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you. Alden.
Judy?
The calculation for recycling, I saw a lot reported about people putting stuff in recycling that really shouldn't be recycled. Is that included in that number, or is that factored out?
So the tonnages of the recyclable material that we present here is the total tonnage. We do get reports from our materials recovery facility that we have very clean material. So there is a percentage of that will be waste, but it wouldn't nearly be making up the amount of the increase, if that makes sense.
If I could just add, as you remember when we went through the change of haulers and conversations about what types of program we're going to offer for recycling, a lot of individuals were encouraging us, or the conversation surrounded, forget about my previous comment, the conversation surrounded, should we go to a single stream recycling? Everyone wants to do single stream recycling. The reason that we're able to garnish revenue in and not pay for our recycling is because we don't have single stream. That lends itself to a cleaner recycling stream. It costs less to commingle that, because that's what's done in the end. You don't recycle paper with plastic in the end. You recycle plastic with plastic and paper with paper. So because we separate at the curb, and we're very grateful for the residents doing that, we are able to reduce those costs, as David said, by over $40,000 last year, because the markets are in our favor and we're making money on the recyclable materials.
Right, that's good news. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question, you said that the pounds per bag has been going up, increasing, so how is that going to affect planning? Because obviously to me, what that says, we're charging X amount for bags, whereas before we were getting so much waste, now we're getting 10% more, say, or 15% more solid waste to be recycled. So in a way, it's probably not necessarily helpful to our budget for that.
Yeah, it was good to note a year-over-year average on that, and there was an increase, but the weight per bag is less than the average of the entire program so far.
Okay.
I think it calculated about like 17.91 pounds, and our average per bag was 17.88. So it's very consistent again with the year average, but the year previous, it was 17 and maybe a half, or no, 16.77 pounds. So our behavior, this is a good indicator of behavior.
Yep.
We weren't cramming as much in the bags, all of us collectively in FY20.
And now that we're paying more per bag, we're going to cram it all in.
Yep, but Yeah, but, and again, it's well within the reasonable range. It doesn't seem like that's going to cause a significant decrease in our overall revenues.
Then
Yeah, go ahead.
one follow-up question. And then with all the new developments going in, you have Edgemere, which will, I forget how many houses go in there. Is that going to add to our costs, or are they going to be private?
That is correct, yes.
Private.
Yep.
I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but how on earth do they know what the weight is? They take my bag, they throw it in the truck. They're not counting bags.
Oh, it's bioengineering. They have, I'm just kidding, sorry. No.
Somehow, Dave, I thought you were gonna, okay. I mean, is it just a matter of how many bags are sold divided by the tonnage, and they just do a division?
Yep.
So in that respect, they are basing it on purchases, unlike with the bulk waste, where you can't necessarily line up apples and oranges. In this, assumptions are made. If you sell 100 bags, and you collect 100 tons, you're going to say it's 1 ton per bag.
Correct.
It's as simple as that.
They're ratios
Sure.
that we use to understand the behavior, but, they're not 100% exact as well.
And the residents are good. Need to be reminded that the town doesn't get charged by the hauler how many bags. The town gets charged by the hauler how much tonnage. We use the bags as a mechanism to supplement, not pay for, but supplement the costs of this system, and also to help drive responsible recycling at the curb.
That is correct, yes. And to that point, at the very beginning, when I mentioned the 1.3 in revenues, that is program revenues that are raised by the sale of bags. That doesn't cover the entire cost of the program. The remainder of the revenue comes from the tax levy.
Yep.
Yeah, supplement your point.
Mark?
Judy?
So I apologize, I don't have the report in front of me, so I can't see the numbers. But what I heard you say is that we ended up making more money largely because we were surprised because we got paid for recycling instead of needing to pay for it. However, to Mark's point is that we pay for the tonnage. So if people are stuffing more stuff in a bag, my question is, how much has that eroded what we thought we were going to get from increasing the price of the bags? It sounds like we came out okay because we got paid for the recycling, but if that was to go away, are we going to be in trouble?
Very good point. So one of the reasons I think we may have done better, we obviously anticipated that there would be a change in behavior with the increase of a new bag pricing. So we anticipated, I think 95% of total revenue for this year, but we exceeded that. In some regards, there was no change in behavior on the purchasing of bags, except that maybe people were home more and they were cleaning the house and they were getting more in there. The total tonnage of material, again, the price, it's in line with the averages that we've been using all over the years. So if all of a sudden, the pounds per bag were 35 pounds, that would be a point where I'd start to be more worried, but we're well within the program averages, I guess, over the years. So I do not believe it's eroding our future fiscal planning.
Okay. Even if we don't get paid for recycling? So the bags can stand on their own?
Yes, because, we also, we budgeted appropriately for the recycling. I don't think it was overly cautious. We used the information we had on hand, and so each year we're intending on budgeting an expected amount for the recycling. And the benefit of the enterprise is, at the end of the year, the additional revenues go to retained earnings to sort of alleviate situations that we can't always anticipate in the future.
Right. Mark, if I may?
Yeah.
So are we hitting our 50%? Are we above our 50% or?
Tax levy.
Yes. We are doing better than the 50% at this point. So the tax levy is supplementing less than 50% now.
Do you know, is it 40%?
Yeah, I
8%?
think there is.
30?
Now, I do have a couple figures in here on that. I'm just trying to pull them up. Yeah, it doesn't have, that's the calculated. I apologies, I know I have it in here somewhere.
Talking about the percent
Yep.
recycling or the percent
No, I want to give an accurate number.
budget?
Because we have what we appropriate at town meeting, and regardless of any excess revenues, that money has has been appropriated. It's not like that gets returned back to,
It stays in the enterprise fund.
it stays in the enterprise fund, so.
But it can be drawn on in future years. It's
Yes.
not expended.
Yes, so the FY '21 was budgeted such that the tax levy was the supplement 49.2%, I believe, of the total enterprise. Now, if you were to calculate how much it actually necessarily did, it would be less than that, but that appropriated tax money is still retained with the enterprise.
Right.
Does that make sense, or?
Yeah, is that the slide on page 11, I think?
Kudos to Dennis for seeing this on his phone, man.
Which basically shows, you know, we had substantially more revenue from pay-as-you-throw. But that revenue from tax levy is gonna stay in there, so eventually it will even out. It's for
Yes,
people that-
that's correct.
basically for people that say, well, you didn't pay, we actually paid more pay-as-you-throw than the 50% we're supposed to. Yeah, that happens this year, but next year it could be the other way where we only pay 48% of it and you take it out of the retained earnings.
That's
My
correct.
guess
yes.
would be in 5 years, if that retained earnings continues to grow at $200,000 a year, you know, either bad costs will come down or something else will happen because, you know, the 50% is what we agreed in that. So
Yep.
I'm not too worried 1 or 2 years if we're off by a few percentages. It's gonna happen. If we could be perfect, that'd be great. We wouldn't have any issues with our pension funds either, because we know the future.
There you go.
But
Now, when we started this program, the pay-as-you-throw program, was that, I think, 2007, 2008? Does that sound right?
I believe it's 2008 when we were looking to it and implemented in 2009.
Yeah.
Yep.
The trash collection that had been free was still open to the residents for whom pay-as-you-throw is currently open. I don't think there was a change. But now we have a system whereby the residents of, say, apartment buildings that are not covered by this program are paying through their rent, which goes to the real estate tax paid by the landlord, but are effectively paying for that system, plus they have to pay their landlord to carry the trash from their private hauler separately, whereas folks in detached houses, single-family homes, and for all I know, duplexes, I'm not sure what the limits are getting the benefits of this supplemented program, are getting the pay-as-you-throw effectively. So have we, therefore, over the 15 years or so, 12 years we've been doing this program, have we created a dual-tier solid waste system? Two classes of, who's getting what out of this, with no opportunity for residents to choose which one they want. Rather, it's set by the nature of the structure they live in.
Yep.
Sorry, it's more of a philosophical question
No.
for you, David.
And I don't want to just give a vague answer. I want to, one approach that we are taking going forward is having a comprehensive hauler program implemented throughout town. So every private entity would need to, if there's solid waste collection, recycling would also need to be provided to those tenants. And that would be a program maybe akin to a garage license where the town monitors these private entities and the haulers they're using, and ensures that there's recycling offered to those residents as well, at the necessary or appropriate rate. We have not looked at a dual tier system as you explained explicitly, though.
Well, but that's effectively what we have. You know, since I live in a single family home, I can, for the dollar, whatever it is for the bag, you know, get my trash taken out, whereas someone else has to pay through their rent for the dumpster and all of the other systems. And maybe by the scale, the volume, they've got a better deal, or maybe because we have a supplemented program, I've got a better deal. But regardless, we're all paying taxes, and the tax system, the tax levy is supplementing the rest of that cost. So in effect, we have these two systems: who gets pay-as-you-throw, who doesn't get pay-as-you-throw, but everyone has to pay the taxes. And on top of that are the commercial and industrial tenants that don't have pay-as-you-throw at all, but are also contributing in to this tax system. That's what I'm thinking, and I don't think that this is controversial. I mean, I think this is how it was set up. This is how it's always been. But you know, it just, as the system ages, it becomes more. The contrast gets more and more stark. That's my concern. It becomes a haves and have-nots, or, you know, supplemented or supplemented not.
I think there's a lot of things in this town between owning a home and renting where you're going to have haves and have-nots.
Right.
I also don't know that this is the appropriate forum to go over that right now.
Well, I don't know why this isn't. We're talking about the pay-as-you-throw program, and we're the finance committee that represents the residents
Right, and
of
we've
the town.
gone over the financials. I'm not sure we need to do the social justice of whether we're, you know, give everyone a fair share or not. I think that would be a different meeting, and probably selectmen and other people involved in that.
I'm just trying to understand it, so that way the selectmen set this policy. This is definitely above our pay grade to make that decision. But in the end, we will be approving a budget, or we'll certainly be recommending a budget for this item. And so it's good for us to have a sense of who's benefiting from this service and who's not benefiting from the service. If it was different, if there was a different service like fire, you know, highways or schools or something that were only open to some of our residents and not others based on the structure.
I mean, there's a
we'd be
service called
concerned.
plowing the center of town versus plowing, you know, Neptune Drive's sidewalks. I mean, a lot of this stuff happens, but I think that's a different
Absolutely.
form for that.
I think that's actually a very good comparison, Dennis. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, excellent. I appreciate all the questions. Again, we'll get this posted and, I'm sorry.
Is there more, Ginny?
Yes.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry, Chief.
so we're saying the retained earnings of 348,000, right, at the end of fiscal '21?
Yep.
As a benchmark, I mean, for other towns who kind of do the same thing, is that good number, bad number, too high, too low? Or there isn't any such thing to look at?
I wish I could give you a good answer. Throughout the Commonwealth, the pay-as-you-throw model is used a good amount, but the funding sources are very different. So some towns may use the pay-as-you-throw program to fund all of it. Some of it may be 90% supplemented by the tax levy. So I don't have a good number to report on you at this time. For ourselves, this is a good retained earnings for the town. But I'm sorry, I don't have much more at this time.
I'm just thinking aloud, to the extent there is excess in there, it's like, you know, and to Mark's point, right, that much more taxes are being paid to fund an excess into something we don't need,
I mean,
hypothetically.
my personal opinion is that the 50% mark really, I think that's too much out of the tax levy. So, I mean, if we do have a situation here where we're taking in more and we can reduce the tax levy that's used for a year, I think we should do that. So, you know, that's, I just want to be clear, when I was asking the questions, my goal is always going to be to try and have the pay-as-you-throw program stand on its own, as much as possible. I understand that that's not my role to create policy, but I just want to be clear and where my questions were going. I think I've been clear in the past what my viewpoint is on this, but I just wanted to say that for clarification. So thank you for indulging me.
Of course.
Anyone else? Questions for Dave? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, David.
Now, as promised, the town manager's report.
All right, so we will work through the fiscal year 23, which will start July 1st, 2022 revenue manual. The revenue manual is the first step that we take in each and every year's budget process. And it is the estimate that we use at the outset of the budget process and use it to form financial policies, annual financial objectives, and guidance to department heads for them to develop their budgets for the coming fiscal year. So we are going to provide an overview. I'll do some comparisons year over year, talk a little bit about our largest revenue sources, and dive into some of the detailed local receipts. I just want to take the opportunity to, one, thank David Snowden for that presentation and his management under Jeff Howland's watch for the DPW. And when it comes to the revenue manual, 99.9% of the work that was done in it was completed by Alex Martinez, and I'm taking the last 0.1% and presenting it to you this evening. It's my pleasure to be able to work with both of them. So the revenue projections that we're using are in some ways statutory and formulaic, and other ways are based upon the historic trends of the towns, especially in the areas of local receipts. So we'll kind of tease that out as we go through it as well. So as we look forward to fiscal year 23, we're projecting a total available revenues of $164,140,263. This slide illustrates that our top three, well, all of our revenue categories will remain very consistent year over year as far as a percentage of the funds and how they're allocated, with our largest source being the tax levy, which includes exempted tax levy for debt service of $102.6 million, state aid being our second largest category of 24.9, and utility revenue 18.9, local receipts 11.6. Various other categories that we use are will be illustrated throughout the rest of the program, but they largely go to fund things like our capital improvement program and debt service for Selco, who provides that funding to us, and it's expended through the operating budget. So on the screen now is a comparison of the fiscal year 21 end results, the fiscal year 22 budget, which we're currently working through, and our projection for the initial look at fiscal year 23. For the tax levy itself, we're projecting a net increase of $4,069,029. That has a great deal to do with two primary things. One, Proposition 2.5, which allows us to increase the previous tax levy by 2.5%. And this year we have the unique benefit of raising the balance of the $9.5 million override, which was not raised in fiscal year 22, as we discussed in this run-up to the special town meeting. So I will reiterate, we are proposing to raise to the full levy limit for fiscal year 23 in this budget cycle. You will note that there is quite a significant drop in revenues that will need to be raised for debt service. We're reducing debt service revenue obligations from $12.8 to $9.5 million. The largest difference is that fiscal year 22 is the final year that we will require debt service payments for the high school, and a little bit of additional obligation that was associated with the Allen Farmer Centec North property will also no longer be an obligation. And we also use what is referred to as a declining debt service approach. So we strike level principal on each and every year, and then as the principal balance is reduced, the amount of interest that we owe on an annual basis declines, and it gives us a benefit as lower pressure on the tax rate and less obligations for our residents. So the unfortunate news about the high school being paid off is that the Massachusetts School Building Authority was picking up about 12.8 of the $3 million bill. So we'll definitely receive, a net benefit of around $300,000, but it will not be that full $3 million benefit. But of course, that's been good for the taxpayers over the years. So if you look at a bottom line comparison between fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, we come to that total net increase of a little over $4 million, a little less than $4.1 million. So we look at state aid very early in the cycle for state aid. Of course, the governor normally presents his budget within the last few weeks of January. State aid is our second largest source of revenue each and every year. And the largest aspect of state aid continues to be Chapter 70 aid, which is for educational purposes only. For that figure, we are attributing a $30 per pupil increase, which is the minimum through the current state aid formula. We are anticipating a roughly 1% in general unrestricted government aid, which is the second largest subcategory. And we've level funded Chapter 90 tax exemption and cherry sheet offsets, which have specific purposes which they're funded and therefore have no net impact on the bottom line. You will also see that, of course, we've leveled out that school construction funding, which will no longer be available for us, but we don't have the reciprocal expense either. So I am encouraged by the strong state revenue numbers at this point in the fiscal year. Each and every month and each and every quarter thus far in the fiscal year, state revenues have greatly exceeded the estimates for this year's budget. And the Baker-Polito administration have done a wonderful job of increasing general government aid consistent with overall state revenue growth. And therefore, hopefully our 1% estimate at this point in the budget process is greatly exceeded when Governor Baker issues his budget near the end of January. Turning over to utilities, which I'm only going to spend a really brief time on, even though it's our third largest revenue category. Our enterprises are completely balanced and do not have a negative impact upon the tax levy. They actually reduce the tax levy by allowing us to bring in indirect costs from those rate fees to offset some of the administrative and associated costs of our operations of our Department of Public Works.
Well, excuse me, just if I may,
Sure.
I just want to catch,
Yep.
understand that, or maybe Jeff might be able to address this. You're saying that effectively we save some money from these enterprise funds and from the tax levy because we're actually able to pay for some of Jeff's employees' salaries by doing this. But conversely, aren't those salaries isn't there liability of those salaries because of those programs? I mean, I think it's kind of, if you'll forgive the expression, a wash, because, if we didn't do this money, if the taxpayers paid for all these services, we'd still have to pay for that. We'd still have to pay for those employees. We have them because of the services. Or if it was privately contracted water and sewer systems, we would be saving. We wouldn't have all those employees because some of those employees would be working in the private sector. So I'm not sure we're getting a benefit of it. I think it's just dollar in, dollar out.
Well, so I understand what you're saying, but as far as our ability to recover indirect costs, it's more than 1-for-1 on an expense of direct employees in the utilities. For instance, the town of Shrewsbury would, likely still have some type of director of public works, even if we didn't have a water and sewer department. However, there would be only the tax levy to fund it. We'd conceivably still have cemetery operations, public buildings, highway, and we are able to utilize a portion of the utility revenue to offset, for instance, Mr. Howland's salary and administrative staff and things like that. So I do think there is a clear net benefit of operating utilities when you compare those two bottom lines.
In the end, maybe it's a scale question?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
Is there also an advantage on service and service quality and service timing by having the utilities
I think
running
so.
out of here and having at
Yep.
least a number of local employees?
Absolutely.
Where
I mean, I
you
think
have
the
a-
net
you have
benefit.
a sewer line break or a water line break, you got to call a contractor company.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be in so many hours. Here we can actually dispatch 2, 3 employees to start to
Absolutely.
work.
Yep.
So I think there's a benefit that we have to take into account that's not on the paper, and there's a benefit of having our own utility companies, both water, electric. I mean, how often have we lost power for 4 or 5 weeks at a time?
Well, but the power's not part of this.
No, but I'm just saying in general, you having local utilities, water, how often, we have a water
Sure,
department
yeah.
that can, I'll get up and for work in the morning, there's a water department already working on a pipe that's out in the middle of town.
Well, certainly, and that's the reason we have these in town, and they work so well. I was just questioning the finance point about it, and as long as I can remember, and probably longer than that, Shrewsbury's always matched its water and sewer by fees, 1-to-1, as close as possible. Understanding that sometimes there are difficulties for the finance, difficulties in the calculations, but even right down, if I understand it right, even OPEB, it gets matched from there.
Correct.
So, okay, thank you.
So I do anticipate when we produce fiscal projection 1 that the $18.9 million in revenue will be much higher than that, as we will thoroughly vet the capital improvement needs of all these utilities and identify the rate associated funds to cover those costs. So that's the biggest difference really right now at this preliminary look, is that we haven't fleshed out those needs at this point. So moving into local receipts, which is our 4th largest revenue category and most elastic and varies the most year over year, we're able to really increase local receipts greater than I would have anticipated sitting here at this time last year. We've experienced a really V-shaped recovery with regards to local receipts. We definitely had a dip in fiscal year 20, 4th quarter, very anemic related to the pandemic and associated economic shutdowns. Fiscal 20 year, we quickly rebounded, bringing in $13.1 million. I will compare that $13.1 million actual result of fiscal year 21 to our fiscal year 22 budget of $10.8 million. So we're certainly in a very strong financial position, as we were projecting a prolonged downturn from the pandemic, but hopefully the trend will continue in fiscal year 22 and will exceed revenues. So I'll talk a little bit about why we're only recommending $11.6 million despite the performance in fiscal year 21 as we go throughout some of these individual receipt categories. But local receipts in general is largely driven by motor vehicle excise tax, which is over half of the $11.6 million that is estimated. So here's a complete look at the previous fiscal years. You'll note the fiscal year 20 dip that we talked about, and the V-shaped recovery from 19 down to 20 and back up to 21. Also its position with regards to the fiscal year 22 budget. In the 5 years prior to fiscal year 19, we were on about a 6% annual growth rate year over year for our revenues that come in through local receipts.
Mark, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we could go back to the slide on local receipts. So as far as licenses and permits, we've talked a lot about that. There was a big rise because of the pandemic, but could we consider that could continue because of cultural or behavioral changes in people's ways of working and all that, or is that something you've just gone back to the original model pre-pandemic?
I mean, I'm very. I don't think we can rely upon those strong numbers. Even in the first quarter of this fiscal year, we're seeing more historic numbers, more traditional permits. That has I think a double benefit of the pandemic behavior, so to speak, and people investing in pools and themselves and renovating the kitchen, those types of things, and then the significant several $100,000 attributed to the Edgemere Drive-In redevelopment project. All of those building permit fees are within the fiscal year 21 number, and certainly we don't obviously, as you know, have a project like that every year to really drive that type of revenue. $980,000, which is proposed, is greater than average, and we have a little more detailed slide on that, and we'll certainly dive in on that and continue that conversation. Motor vehicle excise tax, just illustrating from fiscal year 17 through the recommendation for fiscal year 23. We have seen a decline year over year, even despite the challenges associated in fiscal year 20. Fiscal year 21 was less in actual revenue than fiscal year 22. I, of course, have the ongoing concern that everyone's just waiting to hear, that car production, microchips, things like that will continue to mute motor vehicle sales. And since it's our largest revenue category, I don't think we want to get too aggressive here. It's also, as you all also know, that it's really hard to predict what the auto market's going to be doing in June of 2023, whenever we're sitting here in November of 2021. So that's certainly within the fiscal year 23 budget, and we'll continue to look at these numbers. And a motor vehicle excise tax, our largest commitment, known as Commitment 1, goes out in February and is due normally before the end of March. So that's another complicating factor. It's often hard to see the performance in the prior year until really late in the budget process, which is something we always talk about.
Kevin, how accurate is that commitment request compared to the actual ownership of cars? How lagging are those numbers? You know, how do we get that number? I assume straight from RMV or some other such thing.
That is correct. It's straight from.
And how up to date is it?
It's straight from the Registry of Motor Vehicle and is a snapshot as of motor vehicle ownership of February 1 of every year. So
so we turn it right around from the February 1st date.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it is our largest commitment each and every year. And we do other commitments, normally 5 or 6 a year, to pick up other new vehicle sales and transfers and things like that. But, you know, that will be about nearly a $5 million commitment out of the little over $6 million that we'll collect throughout the whole year.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone? Did you have something?
Yes. The other excise tax, right? The increase you're budgeting from 562 to 960. What's in that line item?
So I don't know. I do not. So other excise tax is primarily meals tax and motel tax. And we have experienced a tremendous rebound in meals excise tax in the first quarter, unlike, what I just said under licenses and permits, in that we've collected almost 50% of the amount we've budgeted for the year in the first quarter. I think one of the indicators or reasons that we're seeing that is because we experienced above average growth in the number of restaurants in the town in 2018 and 2019, but never really got to experience that as the pandemic kind of set in. So we're seeing that industry recover in general. So we're able to increase it back to its normal, but then we have more meals tax coming in than we had anticipated. So that's the main driver on that one.
Anyone else on this? Why don't we have the marijuana numbers in this system, or is it entirely separate?
It's Alex reminded me that marijuana is within the other excise tax as well. Yep.
That makes sense. Okay.
Right there, right there.
Other excise?
Yeah. Goes in the other. Okay.
Has the delivery business that's on Route 20 opened yet, or?
No, that's not anticipated till May.
Okay.
Yep.
As we discuss the fiscal 23 budget, is it possible to add a column to this which will kind of show us what the actuals are?
Year to date?
Yes.
Sure. You can do that. Yep. Happy.
Yeah.
I'll get a summary report out after or tomorrow. Yep.
And you'll put it up, say, on the FinCom web page.
Sure.
Just for the millions of people who watch this.
That would be good, though, to have the actual.
So landfill receipts are the amount of money that the operator of the landfill pays to the town per cubic yard for depositing ash into the landfill. So our landfill is a monofill landfill that only ash is deposited into it, and that ash is brought in from places like the incinerator that you see along the Mass Pike that's located in Millbury, but also other incinerators in the Northeast, depending on the need of the operator to receive and take that in from those facilities. It's been, although the chart doesn't really look like it, we've done some stabilization and planning and modeling of the amount of revenue that we'll receive because of the reduction that was experienced in fiscal year 20. So as we balance that out, there is a slight decline of only about $50,000 out of the $1.5 million revenue that we anticipate. Again, this is a very formulaic number that we work with the landfill operator on an annual basis to project. And then they provide us equal monthly installments throughout the course of the fiscal year and do a audit of actual airspace that was filled in the month of July and provide any reconciling information, whether that's a check or near-term reduction in monthly revenues for the upcoming fiscal year.
Vikram?
Kevin, just to go back to the landfill, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a receipt that we don't have much long-term viability because we're running out of landfill space.
That is correct. Yeah.
We will be losing these, or they'll considerably go down in the next
It could,
years? Or?
yeah, it's could, we're in the 8 to 10 year time frame based on existing cells, but the operator is actively exploring opportunities to expand their footprint with the land that they have and others. Yep.
Judy?
That's my question.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
So licenses and permits, again, back to Mr. Chabra's question, we are using a much more historic number. The fiscal year 17 first column on the left here represents the maximum year that for the Lakeway Commons development. So you can see how that was kind of a blip on the chart as well. Again, fiscal year 21, we talked about those anomalies. Fiscal year 22 budget, which we'll get those actuals to everyone, is trending close to budget, and I don't see any ability to get too aggressive, but we are aware of a number of potential development projects within the community that have come before the Board of Selectmen or we've met with on a staff level, so I am confident that we can increase it, at least at this point as shown, as some of those projects would continue to mature and we get a better understanding on the timeline for the projects. We may be able to increase it as we move towards fiscal projection 1. So moving beyond the local receipts into other revenue categories, we're projecting a reduction in the use of free cash, which is a good thing for our overall fiscal health. Free cash is a one-time revenue source. It's like a savings account that we draw upon for various purposes. And primarily in fiscal year 23, roughly $1.6 million of our anticipated thoughts at this point would be for the capital improvement plan. And then the balance of the use of free cash goes to miscellaneous funding of items throughout various warrant articles. So we're happy that we can reduce that. We would not plan to use any free cash in the operating budget for fiscal year 23. The reduced levy includes $500,000 in free cash. This is a special provision that's available to the town under Mass General laws to provide tax relief through non-levy sources. We do get revenue in from municipal light and cable operations, which help fund town operations and other associated expenses. Total is consistent, as has been over the last 5 to 8 years, of about $1.5 million in this revenue category. Other available funds, I'll quickly walk through these. Traditional amount of funding from revenue from the sale of cemetery lots. The light revenue is funding from Selco for dedicated debt service payments. The same as the cable TV revenue immediately under it. That's for the fiber to the home project, $1.1 million in fiscal year 23. So Selco will provide the town that $1.5 million to offset the debt service, which will be part of the operating budget. The library capital campaign, this is the second of 2 years in closing out the funds that were raised outside of the tax rate for that project. And satisfying debt obligations and relieving taxpayers. And then the Cable Public Access Fund is the fees that fund the operations of Shrewsbury Media Connection, which come in from the assessment on the cable bills of customers. So a total decrease because of the transfer from the sale of Centec North at the special town meeting is about $2.3 million year over year. But other available funds for fiscal year 23 is actually pretty consistent with the historic norm given Selco's debt obligations. So that's an overview of the revenues. I just want to take a couple minutes and do a quick comparison since we did a 5-year financial forecast last spring and talked so much about that with regards to the override conversation. I'll highlight some changes that we now see with the benefit of time here in November versus what we projected last March. So on your screen in the green rows, you'll see I've identified recurring revenue sources. And a comparison in the various columns from 3/16/21, which is the initial financial forecast that we'll base financial decisions on for this fiscal year, and the final fiscal year 22 budget. So all in all, there's a number of ins and outs, really showing on a bottom line of an overall reduction of about $155 million in total revenue available in comparison to what we thought we would have in March of 2021. But the good news is that's being really kind of not an actual representation because the exempted tax levy is going down by almost $600,000, and those expenses are going away as well. So that's a great benefit to the taxpayers and provides relief in the tax rate. You will see that the base tax levy is increasing over what we thought it would have been. State aid, just a modest reduction, which I'm sure will be cleaned up as the governor presents his budget. Schedule A receipts up almost $450,000 in comparison to what we thought we'd be able to allocate. And then just some other minor changes there at the bottom in the free cash and, in the reducing the levy and other available funds. So I'll quickly turn to analysis of the recurring revenues, which is a good indicator of fiscal stability. We do see about $646,000 in additional reoccurring revenues able to be introduced at the outset of this budget process in comparison to where we thought we would have been when we were discussing the override last year. Primarily driven again through strong local receipts, so very happy to be able to show that. And then I'll just close it out by putting the comparative slide back up, fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. $164 million will be available at the outset of the budget process for all the various expenses. And we'll work within the framework that has been developed by the school committee and the Board of Selectmen as we set the spending within the operating budgets.
Now we'll look it over. Anyone have any questions on this or other parts of this presentation?
And just for my understanding, what's Schedule A receipts?
Sorry, those are local receipts. It's those two terms are interchangeable. I apologize. It's Schedule A is the category on the state reporting forms that we have to use.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And this covers both sub-item 1 and some sub-item 2, reviewing the budget. No, wait, we still do the budget schedule, right? Or is that just going to cover that?
We do have the budget schedule that's in your folder.
Yep.
It lays out a number of things, including the proposed budget hearing dates for the fiscal year 23 budget by the Finance Committee. We will be issuing budget guidance to departments early in December. Department budgets will be due near the end, and then the Finance Committee will begin its review in March.
Do we expect everything to be roughly on the usual ordinary timetable?
Yes.
Has the selectman and the assessor set the tax rate?
Yes.
And what's the magic number? I missed it.
1411.
1311. Okay.
What-
1411.
1411, something 11. Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions about the budget timetable? Okay, thank you. We already covered item number 5. And speaking of schedules, we're going to go to item number 6, which is our meeting schedule, which looks like the first 3 meetings on it are just the typical third Thursday of the month. Is that?
First 4, actually. First 4, actually, are.
Yeah, I guess you're right. First 4 are the third Thursday, right? Yeah, third Thursday of the month. And we will do our budget hearing. So now we're definitely doing it as a Thursday night presentation and a full day Saturday. Bam, bam, done, right? Is that the theory?
That is the theory, yeah. And we'll continue to work with you as far as your expectations for that and the total amount of time that we need to allot for it. Yes.
Anyone have any thoughts?
I think we've done it 2 years in a row, haven't we? With a
Yes,
Thursday and a Saturday?
we have.
Seems to have worked. Any comments from the department heads or school department who've presented that, are they okay with the schedule as we do it?
Yep, everyone's been pleased in the past 2 years.
Okay, well, if they're happy, I'm happy. Okay. Correspondence. I will merely note the first 6 items because they were all in relation to the special town meeting. Those are items A through F. Meanwhile, the next item is an email to the Finance Committee from the Mass Municipal Association via Denise Baker regarding the Finance Committee handbook. I hope you've all had a chance to peruse it. It's helpful, it's useful, I suggest it. And finally, an email from Anna Darrow, who works in Hannah Kane's office, about the ARPA spending bill. That, at least in that email, was engrossed by the House, waiting the Senate. Kevin, has that gone through? Do you know?
They failed to take action and are out of formal session, so they'll reconsider it in January.
Okay. Well, there's that. Is that going to impact our budget? Are we dependent on any of that? No.
We'd have benefited from it, but we are not dependent on it.
Fair way to put it. Thank you. Before we finish, I just want to let folks know that anyone watching, that the Finance Committee can always be reached on email at financecommittee@shrewsburyma.gov, but that is a public record, and we will note it in correspondence. Or you can send a written, old-fashioned email. Do we accept telegrams, too? We do not accept telegrams, but send them to the Finance Committee, care of the Town Manager's office. And that's it for business. Unless anybody wants to do something else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Motion there, second there. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, good night.